The rain fell like acid from the dark red sky, sizzling on the metal streets of Varan City. Smoke rose from vents and open fires, mixing with the cries of traders and the sharp smell of burning oil. The slave market stood in the middle of it all, loud, cruel, and filled with fear. The air was thick with the scent of wet iron and sweat. Aliens of many kinds shouted numbers, waved credit chips, and dragged frightened captives across the floor. Inside a glass cage sat a small alien girl, no more than 16 in human years. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes large and silver, glowing softly even in the gloom. Her thin arms trembled as she hugged her knees. Chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles. She had stopped crying hours ago. There were no more tears left. The guards laughed whenever they passed her. One called her defective, another said she was worthless. The girl didn't answer. She only stared at the puddle beneath her feet, watching her reflection blur in the rain. The auctioneer, a thick-skinned alien with 4 eyes, stepped onto the stage. "Next item," he shouted. "One female from the Valari species. Weak but alive. Start the bidding at 200 credits." The crowd murmured. No one raised a hand. The auctioneer slammed his fist. "Come on. She's young, obedient. Someone must want her." Still silence. Some aliens laughed. Others turned away. The girl lowered her head, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. In her mind, she whispered to herself, "Maybe it's better this way. Maybe if no one buys me, they'll just end it quickly." Then, a new sound echoed through the market. Slow footsteps, steady, heavy, and calm. The guards turned. The crowd went quiet. Out of the smoke walked a tall figure wearing a long, dark coat. His boots clicked against the metal floor. A hood covered his face, but his movements were confident, precise. The auctioneer frowned. "What are you doing here, human?" he spat. "This is not your kind of market." The man said nothing at first. He stopped in front of the cage. The alien girl looked up through the glass, her eyes meeting his. For a long moment, he simply stared. At her bruises, her trembling hands, the hopelessness in her gaze. Then he exhaled slowly and pulled down his hood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A human in a place like this was rare, dangerous even. Humans were considered outsiders in this part of the galaxy. Too unpredictable, too emotional. The auctioneer's mouth twisted into a sneer. "Don't tell me you're here to buy that thing." "She's useless." The man ignored him. His voice came out low but firm. "How much?" The auctioneer laughed. "How much for her?" 5,000 credits. He said it mockingly, expecting the human to walk away. Instead, the man reached into his coat and tossed a glowing cube onto the counter. The cube flashed blue, confirming payment. The laughter stopped. Even the guards blinked in shock. "You're serious?" the auctioneer asked. The man nodded once. "She's mine," he said. The girl's heart stopped. Did he just claim me? Her breath came shallow and fast. She didn't know whether to feel fear or hope. The auctioneer grumbled but took the payment anyway. "Fine, take her. But if she causes trouble, don't come crying to me." The human stepped closer and pressed a button on the glass. The cage door opened with a hiss. The girl flinched as he knelt beside her. She waited for a slap, a kick, a cruel word. But instead he removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric was warm, smelling faintly of smoke and leather. "You're freezing," he said quietly. "Can you stand?" She stared at him, speechless. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Slowly she nodded. He helped her up carefully, as if she were made of glass. The crowd watched in silence. No one dared to stop him. He placed his arm around her to steady her and began walking toward the exit. The rain outside hit them like cold needles, but to her it felt cleaner than the air inside the market. She looked up at the human's face. His jaw was strong, his eyes calm, but there was something deep behind them. Pain, maybe. Or memories. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why did you buy me?" He didn't answer right away. Then, as they reached the shadow of his waiting ship, he finally said, "Because you shouldn't be here." She blinked, unsure what that meant. As the ship's ramp opened with a hiss, she looked back one last time at the market of chains, her prison. The crowd had already gone back to shouting and bidding as if she'd never existed. But deep inside, for the first time, she felt something warm, a spark of hope. The man led her inside, closing the ramp behind them. The engines roared to life, and as they lifted off through the storm, the alien girl realized that her life, once worthless to everyone else, had just begun to mean something to one human who simply said, "She's mine." The hum of the ship's engines echoed softly as it rose through the smoky skies of Varan City. Inside, the alien girl sat near the back wall, wrapped in the human's coat. It was too large for her, but it felt like a shield against the cold and fear. Drops of rain still clung to her pale blue skin. She looked around the cabin. Metal walls, blinking lights, a small table covered with maps and strange tools. Everything was new, alien to her eyes. The man stood at the control panel, pressing buttons with calm precision. His movements were steady, almost mechanical, but his eyes carried the weight of something heavy. After a while, he spoke without turning around. "You can sit anywhere you like," he said. His voice was deep but not harsh. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice trembled whenever she tried to speak. No one had ever spoken to her kindly before. On Varan, words were weapons, not comfort. Finally, she whispered, "Why did you buy me?" The man turned. For a second, he seemed unsure how to answer. Then he said softly, "Because no one else should own you." Her eyes widened. No one had ever said something like that. "But you paid for me," she said. He gave a faint smile. "That's not the same as owning." The engines roared louder as the ship broke through the clouds. Outside, the city disappeared beneath the smoke. Inside, silence settled between them again. The man opened a storage box and pulled out a small packet. He placed it on the table near her. "Eat," he said. She stared at it. It was warm food. Real food, not the tasteless paste she'd been fed in captivity. The smell made her stomach twist with hunger, but she hesitated. "Is this for me?" He nodded. "It's called bread. Humans eat it all the time." Slowly, she picked it up. The warmth seeped into her cold fingers. She took a small bite and tears filled her eyes. It was soft. It tasted like nothing she had ever eaten before. Simple but real. She ate slowly, afraid it might vanish if she finished too quickly. The man sat down across from her. "What's your name?" he asked. She froze. It had been so long since anyone asked her that. She had almost forgotten it. "Leora," she said quietly. "My name is Leora," he nodded. "I'm Arden." Leora whispered his name under her breath, testing the sound. "Arden, thank you." But her peace didn't last long. A sharp alarm rang from the ship's console. Red lights blinked across the walls. Arden stood up instantly and checked the screen. His expression hardened. "They've flagged the transaction," he muttered. "The market authority knows I took you." Leora's heart raced. "They'll come for me," she said, her voice trembling. "They always come back." "Not this time," Arden said, his tone firm. "Hold on." The ship jerked as he switched to manual control. Outside, 2 patrol drones appeared on the scanner. They were closing fast. Arden flipped switches, muttering calculations. "We'll break orbit before they can jam us." Leora gripped the seat tightly. The ship shook violently as it climbed higher. Alarm screamed. Through the window, she saw bright trails of plasma chasing them. The drones were firing. "Can't they let me go?" she cried. "Slavers never let go," Arden said. "They think they own everything." He steered the ship sharply to the right, dodging another blast. The girl fell forward, catching herself on the table. Her breath came fast. The man's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Stay down. Trust me." Then, with one last command, he activated the jump drive. The stars outside stretched into thin lines, and the ship vanished into hyperspace. Moments later, silence returned. The hum of the engines softened. Leora's hands shook as she looked out the window. Space glittered before her, endless, quiet, beautiful. Arden turned toward her. "We're clear," he said, breathing out slowly. "They won't find us soon." Leora didn't know what to say. No one had ever fought for her before. She looked at him, her silver eyes glistening. "You risked your life." "For me?" He shrugged slightly. "For what's right." She stared at him in wonder. "Humans are strange," she whispered. Arden chuckled softly. "That's what everyone says." The moment felt peaceful, almost unreal. But deep inside, both of them knew it wouldn't last. Somewhere behind them on Varan, the slave traders were already sending a signal across the stars, a bounty placed on one human who dared to break their rules. As the stars glimmered outside the viewport, Leora held the coat tighter around herself. For the first time, she felt safe. Yet she also felt the stir of something else, hope mixed with fear, gratitude mixed with confusion. Who was this man who claimed her not to own her but to free her, and what would the galaxy do to stop him? In the darkness of space, the ship moved forward quietly, carrying two souls who didn't yet realize that their bond would soon change far more than their own lives. It would change the story of what it meant to be human. The ship drifted through the endless dark, a small shadow moving between the stars. Inside, the lights were dim and soft, humming quietly with each pulse of the engine. Leora sat near the viewing window, her hands wrapped around a cup of warm water. She watched the colors of space, the blue streaks of far-off suns, the faint shimmer of dust, and the glowing trail they left behind. For the first time in her life, there were no cages around her, yet the silence still frightened her. Arden walked into the cabin, his boots echoing lightly on the metal floor. "You didn't sleep," he said. His tone wasn't a question. It was an observation. Leora shook her head. "I'm afraid to," she whispered. "Whenever I close my eyes, I see them again. The guards, the chains, the cage." Arden leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You're safe here. No one can hurt you." She looked down, her fingers trembling slightly. "You say that like it's easy." He sighed softly. "It's not easy, but it's true." He turned toward the control screen, adjusting their flight route. The ship's AI beeped quietly, displaying a map of the nearby star systems. "We'll need to refuel at a small outpost on the edge of the rim," he said. "After that, we can find a safe world." "Safe world?" she repeated. "Is there such a place?" Arden smiled faintly. "There's always a place if you know where to look." Leora hesitated, watching him closely. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. He didn't answer right away. He opened a drawer, pulling out a small device. A faint light projected an image into the air, a photo of a woman and a little boy both smiling. Leora tilted her head. "Who are they?" "My family," Arden said quietly. "They were taken by raiders. A long time ago. I couldn't save them." He looked at the image for a moment longer before turning it off. "I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to stop it from happening to someone else, I would." Leora's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she said softly. He waved a hand. "Don't be. You remind me of what still matters." The words stayed with her. She looked back out the window, the stars reflecting in her silver eyes. For the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. Hours passed in quiet peace. Arden gave her food again, simple but warm. She learned how to use the small kitchen and even smiled when she managed to pour a drink without spilling. Arden noticed but didn't say anything. He liked seeing her learn, but their calm didn't last. A sudden alarm echoed through the cockpit. The radar screen flashed red. Arden's eyes narrowed. "They found us." Leora rushed to his side. "Who?" "Varen patrol ships," he said grimly. "They must have tracked the energy trail from the jump drive." Her heart pounded. "What do we do?" He scanned the display. 2 ships were closing fast. He gritted his teeth. "We run." The ship shuddered as he boosted the engines. Blue light flared from the rear thrusters and they shot through the dark like a bullet. Leora clung to the seat, watching the stars streak past. The enemy ships fired plasma bolts that exploded near their hull, shaking the cabin. Sparks flew from one of the panels. Arden gripped the controls tighter. "Hold on!" he shouted. He pulled the ship into a sharp spin, avoiding another blast. His hands moved fast, years of flying experience in every motion. "Come on, girl," he muttered to the ship. "Don't fail me now." The enemy ships kept firing, their voices echoing through the comms. "Surrender the stolen asset or be destroyed." Arden's eyes hardened. "They'll have to catch us first." He flipped a switch. The ship dropped suddenly, diving into a nearby asteroid field. Huge rocks spun around them, glowing faintly from reflected starlight. Leora gasped as they weaved between them, each close call sending her heart racing. The enemy followed, but the rocks worked in Arden's favor. He guided the ship through the narrowest spaces, using the asteroids as cover. "We'll lose them here," he said. A plasma blast hit one of the asteroids behind them, lighting up space with a fireball. Leora screamed and covered her ears. Arden grabbed her shoulder. "Stay with me. Don't close your eyes." "I'm trying," she shouted, tears streaking down her cheeks. Finally, after a few more desperate maneuvers, the radar went clear. The enemy ships were gone. Arden slowed the engines and let the ship drift in the quiet. Both of them breathed heavily. Leora looked at him in awe. "You really fought them off," she said. He gave a tired smile. "Barely." Then her voice softened. "You could have left me. You could have escaped alone." Arden looked at her and said, And be like them? No, that's not what humans do. Leora studied his face in silence. Something inside her shifted. The fear that had ruled her for years began to fade, replaced by something unfamiliar: trust. As the ship floated silently through the asteroids, she leaned back, finally closing her eyes. For the first time in a long time, her dreams were not filled with cages or chains. They were filled with stars. And somewhere deep inside she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, freedom was real. In the far reaches of space, darkness was never truly silent. Somewhere beyond the rim of the known systems, a massive alien warship drifted among the stars, its hull lined with glowing red runes. Inside its command chamber, the air buzzed with tension. An officer rushed in, clutching a datapad. "Commander, we've received a signal from Varen Market," he said. The human escaped with the slave. The alien commander turned slowly, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "A human?" His voice was deep and cold. "No one defies the Syndicate and lives." He studied the hologram of Arden's ship projected before him. "Track him. Bring me his head and the girl." As the warship powered up, its engines ignited with a thunderous hum, sending a pulse of light across the void. The hunters were coming. Far away, aboard the small human cargo ship, Leora awoke with a gasp. The sound of alarms still echoed faintly in her mind from the night before. Her chest tightened, but then she remembered where she was. Not a cage, not a market. Inside Arden's ship. Free. She sat up, feeling the warmth of a blanket around her. Arden's coat hung neatly on the nearby chair. For a moment she just looked at it, remembering the way he had wrapped it around her shoulders. She smiled faintly, something she hadn't done in years. The ship hummed quietly. She stood and walked toward the cockpit, her bare feet light on the metal floor. Arden was already there, his eyes fixed on the flickering control screens. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Do humans ever sleep?" she asked, her voice soft. "Sometimes," he replied with a small grin. "Not when they're being hunted." Her smile faded. "They're still chasing us?" Arden nodded. "They won't give up easily, but we'll stay one step ahead." He adjusted the navigation route, setting a course toward a nebula on the edge of the star map. Leora tilted her head. "Why go there?" "It's dangerous," he said, "and that's exactly why they won't follow." She didn't argue. She had learned that humans often hid courage behind simple words, but something still troubled her. "Why risk everything for me? You don't even know who I am." Arden looked at her for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to be forgotten," he said finally. Leora's lips parted slightly. The way he said it, quiet, heavy, told her that behind his calm eyes lived a storm of loss. She wanted to ask more, but the radar suddenly beeped. A faint red dot blinked on the screen. "They found us," he said. Leora's heart skipped. "Already?" Arden leaned closer to the console. "It's not a patrol, it's a hunter signal. They've sent someone specialized." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said grimly, "we don't have much time." Hours later, the hunter ship appeared on their tail, slicing through the darkness like a blade. Its hull shimmered with cloaking energy, nearly invisible except for the faint ripple it left behind. Inside, a bounty enforcer adjusted his targeting system, locking onto Arden's ship. "Human craft detected," the AI announced. Arden noticed the flicker on his sensors. "They're close," he muttered. "Too close." He tightened his grip on the controls. "Hold on." The ship darted through a cluster of asteroids, weaving between glowing rocks. Leora clung to the chair beside him, her eyes wide. "Can't we talk to them?" "Tell them you didn't steal me?" Arden shook his head. "They don't care about truth. Only profit." The hunter ship fired, a burst of plasma striking near their tail. The cabin filled with sparks. Leora screamed, ducking as smoke poured from the console. Arden slammed a fist against the side panel. "Hold together, girl!" he shouted to the ship. "Can I help?" Leora cried. "Grab the red lever. Pull when I say." She nodded, her hands shaking. Another blast hit. The lights flickered. "Now," he yelled. She pulled the lever hard. The ship jerked violently, releasing a cloud of metallic shards from the rear compartment. The shards scattered through space, confusing the enemy's sensors. The hunter ship veered off course, momentarily blinded. Arden seized the moment, accelerating into a nearby nebula. The thick red mist swallowed them whole. Inside, the air was tense but still. The hum of the engines softened. Leora fell back in her seat, breathing heavily. Arden turned off the alarm and looked at her. You did good. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. I helped? He smiled. You did more than that. You just saved us. For a moment, Leora forgot the fear. She smiled shyly, her silver eyes bright in the dim light. Maybe humans aren't the only brave ones. Arden chuckled softly. Maybe not. But as he looked out the window at the red mist swirling around them, his expression hardened again. They'll keep coming, he said quietly. The hunters never stop until they get what they want. Leora frowned. Then what do we do? He glanced at her, his eyes steady. We make sure they never find what they're looking for. Outside, deep within the nebula, something vast moved. An ancient human signal beacon, half buried in the red fog, long forgotten. Arden's gaze fixed on it. It's been years, he whispered. But maybe we're not alone after all. And for the first time since fleeing the market, the human's calm mask cracked, revealing not fear, but hope. The crimson mist of the nebula wrapped around the ship like a living storm. Flashes of light flickered within the clouds, each one followed by the low growl of thunder that somehow echoed even through space. The engines hummed weakly, strained after the chase. Inside, Arden and Leora worked side by side, their faces lit only by the dim blue glow of the control panels. The air smelled faintly of smoke and burnt metal. Sparks still hissed from one of the damaged conduits. Arden knelt beside it, tools spread across the floor. If I can't reroute the power soon, he muttered, we'll be nothing more than a drifting signal in this storm. Leora crouched beside him, holding a small flashlight. Tell me what to do, she said softly. Arden looked up, surprised. You've never repaired a ship before. She shook her head. Then this will be my first time. A small smile tugged at his lips. All right. Hold that wire steady. She did, her hands trembling slightly but firm. The smell of hot metal filled the cabin as sparks flew. She winced when one burned her skin, but she didn't let go. Got it, she said through gritted teeth. Arden glanced at her hand. You're hurt. It's fine, she said. I'm not fragile, he chuckled quietly. You sound more human every hour. Within minutes, the lights flickered back to life. The ship's hum steadied and the screens cleared of static. Nice work, Arden said. You may have just saved us. Leora smiled faintly. Then we're even. Arden looked at her curiously. Even? You saved me. I saved you, she said simply. He laughed. Fair enough. For a brief moment, the tension between them eased, but peace never lasted long in the void. The radar suddenly beeped. Slow, steady pulses that grew faster by the second. Arden's expression darkened. They found us again, he said. Leora's stomach twisted. But how? We're inside the nebula! He studied the signal. They're using a tracer. The syndicate must have planted one when I bought you. Her face went pale. On me? Arden nodded grimly. Probably. A small tag hidden under your skin. Panic flashed in her eyes. Get it out! Please get it out! He reached out gently, gripping her shoulders. Calm down. We'll handle it. He scanned her arm with a small handheld device. A faint beep confirmed the location. A tiny metal dot near her collarbone. Hold still, he said. She clenched her teeth as he used a sterilized tool to make a small incision. The pain was sharp but quick. Within seconds, he pulled out a thin silver chip, no bigger than a grain of sand. He dropped it onto the table and crushed it under his boot. The device sparked and died. Done, he said. They can't track you anymore. Leora breathed out shakily. I didn't even know it was there. Arden wiped the sweat from his brow. That's how they work. Make you think you're free while they're still pulling the strings. The radar continued to beep faintly. Arden frowned. But they're too close already. Even without the tracker, they've locked onto our position. What do we do? She asked. He looked out at the swirling clouds. We set a trap. Hours passed as they worked in silence. Arden loaded several canisters of compressed plasma into the ship's cargo bay, wiring them to a remote detonator. Leora watched nervously. You're going to blow them up? Not exactly, he said. We're going to make them think they already did. When the first blip appeared on the radar again, Arden smiled grimly. They're here. Through the viewing port, a dark shape emerged from the nebula, a syndicate hunter ship, sleek and menacing. Its red lights cut through the mist like eyes searching for prey. Arden pressed a button, releasing a small drone from the ship. The drone carried the plasma canisters away into the fog, broadcasting a fake distress signal. Moments later, the enemy ship locked onto the signal and fired. A massive explosion ripped through the nebula, shaking both vessels. Fire and smoke filled the mist, creating the illusion of destruction. "They think we're dead," Arden said, watching the radar as the enemy signal turned away. Leora stared in awe. "That worked," he nodded. "For now." She exhaled in relief and leaned back against the wall. "You're clever." He gave a half smile. "I've had practice." But even as they celebrated, the ship shuddered again, this time from within. Warning lights flared. "What now?" she cried. Arden's eyes darted to the console. "The explosion knocked out our stabilizer coils. We're losing power." The ship began to spin slowly, drifting deeper into the nebula's core where radiation and magnetic storms raged. Leora clung to the railing. "Can we stop it?" "I'll try," Arden shouted, rushing to the control panel. Sparks flew again. The ship groaned under the pressure. The hull creaked like a wounded beast. Leora stumbled to his side, gripping the edge of the console. "If we die," she said, her voice trembling but brave, "at least we die free." Arden looked at her, startled. But then he smiled. "Not today." He slammed his hand on the emergency lever. The engines roared, fighting the pull of the storm. The ship straightened, stabilizing just above a massive field of glowing red crystals. Leora stared out the window. "What is that?" Arden's eyes widened. "That," he said slowly, "isn't just a nebula. It's a graveyard of old ships and human technology." And as they hovered there, surrounded by ancient wreckage half buried in the mist, Leora realized that their escape had led them straight into something far more mysterious, something that had been waiting for them all along. The nebula glowed like a living ocean around them, swirling with red and gold clouds that shimmered across the viewport. The broken remains of ships floated in silence, twisted metal and shattered hulls drifting like ghosts in a graveyard of forgotten battles. Arden guided his small vessel slowly between the wrecks, the soft hum of the engines echoing against the emptiness. Leora stood beside him, her silver eyes wide. "There are so many," she whispered. "Are they all human?" Arden nodded slowly. "Most of them. Old warships from the first expansion era, back when humanity tried to push this far into Syndicate space. They never made it home." Leora looked around in awe. "They died here?" "Yes," he said quietly. "But they didn't die for nothing." He pointed at a faint light pulsing deep within the debris. "That's a distress beacon. Still running after all these years?" Leora frowned. "How can it still work?" Arden smiled faintly. "Because humans build things that last." He guided the ship toward the signal. As they neared, the old beacon flickered brighter, its pulse strong and steady, an ancient human signal calling through the ages. Leora felt a strange warmth in her chest, something like hope. But before she could speak, the console beeped sharply. "Unidentified transmission detected," the ship's AI announced. Arden's eyes narrowed. "Someone heard the signal." "Who?" Leora asked nervously. He stared at the radar. "I don't know yet, but it's big." The silence broke as a low rumble shook the ship. Out of the mist, a massive shape emerged, sleek, metallic, and terrifying. The Syndicate hunter ship. It hadn't fallen for the trap after all. Leora gasped. "They found us again?" "Of course they did," Arden muttered, gripping the controls. Hunters never quit. The enemy vessel opened fire. Bright plasma blasts streaked through the nebula, tearing through the air like firestorms. The small human ship jerked violently. Panels exploded, lights flickered, alarms screamed. Arden fought to keep them steady, but the engines were too damaged. "Arden," Leora cried, clutching the seat. "We can't take another hit." "I know," he shouted. "Hold on." The ship spun downward, crashing through clouds of dust and fragments of ancient wrecks. Everything shook, sparks raining from the ceiling. Leora screamed as gravity twisted around her. The smell of burning metal filled the cabin. Then silence. Leora opened her eyes slowly. Smoke curled from the dashboard. Arden slumped forward in his seat, breathing hard. "Still alive?" He groaned. She nodded shakily. "I think so." "Good," he said, "because we're not done yet." Outside, the Syndicate ship hovered above the wreckage, its red light scanning the area. The loudspeakers crackled to life. "Human vessel, you are surrounded. Surrender the asset and prepare for boarding." Arden gritted his teeth. Over my dead body. Leora looked at him, panic flashing in her eyes. We can't fight them. We don't even have weapons. He smiled faintly. Who said we don't? He reached under his console and pulled a small transmitter, an old military distress beacon. This ship was built from scavenged parts, he said, but some of those parts came from a human fleet relay. He pressed the activation key. The beacon pulsed once, then again, then began transmitting a coded message. Leora frowned. Will anyone hear it? Maybe, he said. If we're lucky. Moments later, a deep vibration rippled through the nebula. Leora turned toward the window. At first she thought it was another attack, but then the red mist began to part. Out of the fog, gigantic shadows emerged. One by one, enormous human warships appeared, their hulls gleaming with silver armor and glowing blue lights. The Syndicate hunters froze. Leora's mouth fell open. What is that? Arden's eyes softened, pride flickering behind his calm gaze. That's home, he said. The UNSC Earth fleet had arrived. Human warships filled the void like a storm of steel. Their engines roared with thunder. Their cannons glowed with white fire. Across the communication channel, a calm voice spoke. This is Admiral Rains of the United Nations Space Command. Stand down, Syndicate vessel, or be destroyed. The hunter captain hissed through the comms. This is Syndicate territory. Rains replied coldly. Not anymore. In seconds, the human fleet opened fire. White beams sliced through the red mist, tearing the Syndicate ship apart. Explosions rippled across the nebula. Fragments of enemy metal burned bright like falling stars. The battle was over almost before it began. Leora stared, unable to speak. They saved us, she whispered. Arden nodded. They always come when someone calls for help. That's what it means to be human. The communication screen lit up again. Captain Arden, we received your signal, said Admiral Rains. We thought you were dead. Almost, Arden said, smiling tiredly. But I found someone who needed saving more than I did. The Admiral looked at Leora curiously through the transmission. Then bring her aboard. Humanity owes her a new beginning. Leora's voice trembled. I don't understand. You'd help me? The Admiral smiled faintly. You're under human protection now. Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she wasn't a slave, a burden, or a price tag. She was free. Arden rested a hand on her shoulder. Told you, he said quietly. No one hurts what's mine. As the fleet surrounded them and guided their damaged ship toward safety, Leora looked out at the hundreds of human ships blazing through the nebula. For years, the galaxy had whispered that humanity was a dangerous race, ruled by chaos and emotion. But now she saw the truth. Humanity's power wasn't just in its weapons or ships, it was in its heart. And in that moment, among the wrecks of forgotten wars, the galaxy witnessed the rebirth of a legend, the return of the humans who never abandoned their own. The stars outside burned like silver fire as the human fleet drifted through the nebula, its warships gliding with quiet power. Inside one of the smaller vessels, the hum of engines filled the silence between two souls who had survived what should have been their end. Leora sat near the viewport, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of distant suns. Her pale hands rested on her knees, the faint scar near her collarbone a reminder of what had been removed and what had been set free. Arden stood behind her, looking out at the endless expanse. You're quiet, he said softly. Leora smiled faintly. I'm trying to understand something. What's that? She turned toward him. When you said she's mine at the market, what did you mean? Arden chuckled quietly. I wondered when you'd ask. He walked closer, his boots echoing on the metal floor. I didn't mean you belonged to me, Leora. I meant that I wouldn't let them hurt you. That I was responsible for you, for your safety, your freedom. She tilted her head slightly, her voice gentle. So I was yours to protect? He nodded. Exactly. For a long moment she said nothing. Her gaze returned to the window, where the fleet moved like a wall of light against the dark. No one has ever said something like that to me, she whispered. On my world, ownership meant chains. Arden's expression softened. Humans used to believe that too a long time ago. But we learned the hard way that true strength isn't about owning. It's about freeing. The ship glided toward a human colony world glowing softly below, a place of green forests and blue oceans, untouched by war. We'll be landing soon, Arden said. Earth's frontier colony of Nova Eos, it's peaceful. You'll like it. Leora's eyes lit up with curiosity. Is it beautiful? He smiled. It's home. When the ship touched down on the surface, the doors opened to sunlight so bright it made Leora squint. Warm air brushed against her skin, carrying the scent of grass and rain. She stepped down carefully, feeling the ground beneath her bare feet. For years she had walked on metal floors cold and hard. Now the earth felt soft and alive. Arden watched her with quiet satisfaction. Not bad for a first day of freedom, huh? She turned toward him, smiling shyly. It feels strange, but good. Like I'm finally real. As they walked across the landing field, human officers greeted them. Some nodded respectfully at Arden. Others smiled at Leora with warmth and curiosity. No one looked at her with fear or disgust. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outcast. One of the officers handed Arden a data pad. The syndicate is retreating beyond the rim, he said. Word of your stunt spread fast. The galaxy's talking about the human who bought a slave just to set her free. Arden sighed, shaking his head. That's not the story I wanted spreading. The officer smiled. Maybe not, but it's the story they need. Leora looked up at him. You changed more than my life, didn't you? Arden met her gaze. Maybe, but you changed mine too. That evening they stood on a hill overlooking the colony. The twin suns set beyond the horizon, painting the sky in orange and gold. Leora's hair shimmered in the light, her eyes reflecting the glow. She turned to Arden. What will you do now? He chuckled softly. Probably fix the ship again. Maybe take a few less dangerous jobs. And me? She asked quietly. He looked at her, his expression gentle. You can stay here if you want. Start a new life. Or you can come with me. She hesitated. Would you want me to? I'd be honored, he said simply. A tear slid down her cheek, but it was a tear of peace, not sorrow. Then I'll stay by your side for as long as you'll have me. Arden smiled. Then it settled. They stood together as the last light faded, the stars returning one by one. The galaxy was vast and cruel, but for that moment it felt small, just two souls who had found meaning in the chaos. Leora glanced at him again. Arden? Yeah? When you said she's mine? I think I finally understand. He raised a brow. Oh, she smiled softly. You meant I belonged to no one but myself. Arden laughed quietly, the sound warm against the night air. Exactly. Above them, the first of the stars shimmered brighter than the rest, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can light up even the darkest corners of the universe. And as the camera would slowly pan outward, showing the two standing beneath a sky filled with human and alien ships working together, one truth became clear to all who heard their story across the stars. Humanity wasn't dangerous because it fought. Humanity was powerful because it cared.